was on vacation and doing some traveling around the Holy Lands, and he wanted to take his wife on a tour across the Sea of Galilee. And if you've ever seen a picture of Mark Twain, you know he would wear these all-white suits and this large white cowboy hat, and he just looked like a very wealthy Texan to this fisherman that was going to be giving him the tour. And so Mark Twain walks up to him to try and find out how much it's going to cost to take this boat out onto the Sea of Galilee. And this fisherman, seeing the size of Mark Twain, just knew he had to be a wealthy man. So he priced it extremely high, at least according to Mark Twain. And so he decided he wasn't going to mess with it. He was just going to walk away. And as he was walking away, he leaned over to his wife and said, "Well, no wonder Jesus decided to walk across the sea. At these prices, nobody could afford it." We have been studying a series of faith and doubt. So we've been looking at some of the miracles that Jesus has been performing. And this series has kind of been based in large part on John chapter 20. Whenever John is telling about why he has written what he has written, he says this, that Jesus performed many other signs in the presence of his disciples, which are not recorded in this book. But these are written, that you may believe that Jesus is the Messiah, the Son of God, and that by believing you may have life in his name. See, Jesus didn't walk across the sea because it was more convenient, but he performed the miracles that he did because he wants to instill faith. We've learned as we've been walking through this, we've been looking at some of the stories of the disciples, that doubt is not always a bad thing. Sometimes doubt is God's way of taking us into a deeper level of faith. And faith is often different than what we think of faith. Have you ever heard of Pascal's wager? It was this kind of evidentiary proof, or this reason for believing in the existence of God that was made famous by a philosopher by the name of Blaise Pascal. And he kind of looked at faith as a wager. So he kind of posed the question, if you're on your deathbed with an illness, and a doctor comes to you and says that there's this experimental medicine and it hasn't been tested on humans yet, but there's a 50-50 chance. You take this medicine, you're going to immediately get out of the bed, you're going to walk home today. Disease is going to be cured. He said, what do you have to lose? You're on your deathbed. You're going to die if you don't take it. If you take it, there's a 50-50 chance you live. So it's a safer bet if you just take the medicine. Or if you are going and you're buying a lottery ticket and there's 2 tickets, and one of them you are told without a doubt is going to win the lottery. One of them's a winner and one of them's not. You would be a fool not to buy. Because what do you have to lose? It's a 50-50 chance. So that's the way Pascal kind of presents faith, is that it's safer if you just assume there's a God. Even if you're wrong, what have you lost? But if you're right, then you have just bought yourself some fire insurance. That just in case, you're safe. Now, he views that as this kind of elementary way of beginning faith, but it's not a deeper level of faith. But some people, too many people, kind of stay at that level, and faith is just a get-out-of-hell free card. But faith is something completely different in Scripture. Faith, by its very definition, demands action. So last week we looked at Jesus walking on the water to his disciples, and how he provides some anchors for faith for those disciples. The first anchor was that Jesus exhibited his control over the powers of this world. The seas was the most powerful force that they could imagine. It was a force that was often tied to evil in the first century world. The demonic forces. And Jesus is walking on top of and through this storm in order to get to them. Secondly, Jesus shows his presence in the middle of the storm. That they don't have to wait until the storm is over in order to see Jesus, but Jesus is there with them even in the midst of the storm. But we stopped halfway through this story. We stopped with Jesus walking out to them and telling them that they don't have anything to be afraid of because he has control over the storm, that he is with them in the midst of the storm. This morning I want us to go back to Matthew chapter 14, and I want us to look at the second half of this story and look at the faith of the disciples. It's Matthew 14. Verse 27, but Jesus immediately says to them, "Take courage, it is I. Don't be afraid." "Lord, if it's you," Peter replied, "tell me to come to you on the water." "Come," he said. Then Peter got down out of the boat, walked on the water, and came toward Jesus. But when he saw the wind, he was afraid and beginning to sink, cried out, "Lord, save me." Immediately, Jesus reached out his hand and caught him. "You of little faith," Jesus said, "why did you doubt?" Now this story is just bizarre on so many levels. I mean, first you have Jesus walking out on the storm to the disciples. Jesus has set all of this up in order to produce faith in them. And yet they're terrified whenever they see Jesus. And then Peter, who is always the most rash of all the disciples. He's the one that a couple of times we're told that he speaks. And what he says, we're told he says it because he doesn't know what else to say. And you have that friend, right? There's just this awkward silence. And they say the most insane, the most inappropriate things just because they feel like the silence has to be filled. That is Peter. And Peter comes up with this crazy idea. "Lord, if it's you, tell me to come to you." And we have to understand this not as a test of faith. He's not really saying, "if it's you," because what kind of proof is that? I mean, what person in their right mind says, "Okay, you're out walking on the seas, and it scared me to death to watch, and I thought it was a ghost. So how I'm going to prove that you're not a ghost is I'm going to go out and walk on the water too." I mean, how is that going to prove that it's a ghost? If he's right, okay, maybe he walks on the water. If he's wrong, he's dead. It was a ghost. It was just a vision. He was hallucinating things. That is not, he's not trying to test his faith. But this is a testimony of Peter's faith. What Peter is more accurately saying, he's saying, "Lord, I believe it's you, and since it's you, tell me to come to you." Too often we rush to judge and to condemn Peter for his lack of faith. But Jesus doesn't say, "Peter, you had no faith." What he says to Peter is, "You had such little faith." In fact, his little faith was so much greater than any of the other disciples because he's the only one that gets out of the boat. Can you imagine what that conversation was like whenever they get back in the boat? And they kind of start razzing him for falling in the seas? Well, at least I got out. Peter is the one who has faith. Peter is the one who finally understands who Jesus is. That he is exhibiting control over this. And I just want to draw your attention to three powerful affirmations that Peter makes with this simple statement. Lord, if it's you, tell me to come to you. The first affirmation that Peter makes in this statement is that he understands that he should and can do what Jesus does. I mean, this was something that Jesus had been trying to teach them from the very beginning. He calls them, in the very first call, he says, come and I will make you fishers of men. Then in John 14, Jesus makes this incredible statement. Very truly, I tell you, whoever believes in me will do the works I have been doing. And they will do even greater things than these, because I am going to the Father. He goes on to talk about how he's going to be giving the Holy Spirit, and that it's through the Holy Spirit that those who believe in him will do greater things than these. So when Peter says, Jesus, if it's you, since it's you, tell me to come to you, he is affirming that he should be and can be doing what Jesus is doing. So yesterday, at Marsh Air Force Base, they had the air show. And many of you, I know, either went to the show or watched it from your home. The Thunderbirds is kind of the closing act of this show. These fighter jets that are designed to fly at speeds up to 1,400 miles per hour, but at shows they're only allowed to fly up to 700 miles per hour. They fly in formations in which they are about 18 inches apart, flying at speeds of up to 700 miles per hour. As we were with our connection group watching this air show, and every single stunt that happened, somebody said, I could never do that. There's no way you could get me to do that. I would get sick. I would throw up all over the airplane if I was in something that was doing that. And yet, the air show is a recruiting tool. The Thunderbirds are put together in order to demonstrate what they do, in order to recruit people to join the military. Say, look, you can do this too. And yet, there is something in many of us that says, oh, I love to watch that, but there's no way I'm doing that. And I think that too many of us approach faith that way. We approach the Word of God and we read it and we say, oh yes, I believe Jesus did it. I believe in Jesus. I believe that Peter did these things. I believe that Paul did these things. I may even believe that the preacher or the elders do these kinds of things. But me, that's not for me. I'm just going to come and I'm going to sit and watch. Because it's pretty cool to watch whenever people are saved. Peter, in his faith, affirms that he should and can do what Jesus is doing. And that is a powerful statement of faith. Second affirmation within this short statement. He affirms that if Jesus speaks it, it will happen. The Gospel of John begins with these words, in the beginning was the Word. The Word was with God, and the Word was God. John is using a very intentional language to tie the story that he is telling about Jesus Christ with the story of creation, because the story of creation also begins with "in the beginning." And in the story of creation, you have this refrain repeated in Genesis 1, verse 3, and it shows up again in verse 6, and I think in verse 9 and 11. "And God said." Verse 3 says, "God said, let there be light, and there was light." God never moves. He speaks a word, and it's created. And Peter, he doesn't say, "Come and let me stand on your shoulders as we're doing this. This is pretty cool, Jesus." He says, "Jesus, speak. Command me to come," because he understands that Jesus has authority, that he is under authority, that he can control by a command. This is the same kind of faith that Jesus commands of the Roman centurion who comes to Jesus and asks for a healing. And Jesus says, "Yeah, let's go." The Roman centurion says, "Wait a second. I am a man under authority, and I know that if I just speak, it happens. And I know that you also are under authority. And if you speak, it will happen." I may have told this story before, but it's a fitting story. When Fidel Castro was the dictator of Cuba, he was at a baseball game between Cuba and Venezuela. Fidel Castro decided he wanted to get in and join the game, so he picks up a bat and he just walks up to the batter's box. And the Venezuelan president, his name's escaping me right now, Chavez, he decides that he's going to join in too, so he walks to the mound. He starts pitching to Fidel Castro. They get to a 3-2 count. The next pitch, he's going to decide if it is a walk or a strikeout. Throws the ball straight down the middle. Umpire calls it a strike, and Fidel Castro turns around and says, "No, it's not. It was a ball." And he takes first base. And no one says a word. This is what it means to have authority. Not that you can do whatever you want, but that you speak it and it comes into existence. And Peter, in this statement of, "Lord, since it is you, command me to come to you," he's acknowledging that Jesus can just command the word and it will happen. Third affirmation Peter makes is that it is safer in the storm with Jesus than in the boat with the rest of the disciples. That sounds so insane to say. As he is terrified for his life, that Peter seems to believe that if he's out in the middle of the storm, but he's with Jesus, that he's going to be safer than if he's inside this structure that is designed to keep him afloat on top of the storm. Peter's faith was effective enough to motivate him to move outside of the boat. But his faith wasn't strong enough to sustain him. And it wasn't strong enough to sustain him because as he takes a few steps, he starts to look around and it says that he sees the wind. Now, you can't see the wind, right? But you can see the effects of it. And have you ever been there? That you have enough faith to start something new, to get out of the boat, but then you start to get some early results. And maybe the doubts start to creep in. And the doubts that we wrestle with, the questions that we have, while they may not always be dangerous, they become dangerous when we allow our doubts to be more compelling than anything else. And that's when Peter begins to sink. I have no question in my mind that he had doubts as he's steadying his foot outside of the boat, as he's taking the first few steps, and yet Scripture tells us that he actually begins to walk on the water in spite of the doubts. But he sinks when his doubts become more compelling than anything else. In 1952, a woman by the name of Florence Chadwick became the first woman to swim the 26 miles from the California coast to the Catalina Island. The first time she attempted it was a foggy day, and it wasn't too long into the swim as there were two boats on either side of her, just in case she ran into trouble and also to keep the sharks away. Her mom in one of the boats, she kind of pokes her head out to her mom and says, I don't think I can do it. Her mom encourages her. She keeps going for another hour. She swims. Then she finally gives up. Whenever she gets into the boat, she realizes that she was less than a mile away when she quit. That it was because she had lost sight of the goal, the end. And the doubts became more convincing. They became more compelling than the vision of the destination. 2 months later, she got back in the waters with the two boats on either side. And once again, it was a foggy day. And she couldn't see the island at any point during the swim, but she never lost sight of it in her mind. I wonder how many of us, we begin to sink because our doubts become more compelling than anything else. I know that it's a struggle for me every single week. One of the ways that it's a struggle is with finances. Whenever I read in places like Matthew, whenever Jesus talks about not to worry about your clothes or not to worry about the food, and we're encouraged to give of our money. And every single week, whenever we sit down to write the check, we have this perfect budget in mind, and then all of a sudden, children do this thing that is completely unexpected. They grow out of their clothes. And they need new clothes. Or somebody gets sick and a medical bill comes in, and it becomes so easy for the doubts of, can I trust God that I give Him this and He's going to make sure that everything I have left is enough? I don't know. It sounds good at the beginning. It sounds good whenever I say, yeah, God, I'm going to do it. But then there's moments whenever I'm in the midst of the storm that the doubts become so much more compelling than anything else. For others of us, it's not money. Maybe it's sex and the idea of purity. That we live in a world that says that, why would you get married without knowing that you're compatible? Or whenever you start to have trouble in your marriage, that what you need to do is you need to start viewing pornography together, and that's going to solve things. And you are the only voice that says, I just don't, that doesn't feel right, that doesn't sound right. And all of these doubts, can I trust that God's way is good for me, that it's going to be the best for me? Am I really going to step out of the boat and let others see me? I'm going to stand out among everybody else? And in those moments, it becomes very easy for your doubts to become more compelling than anything else? Maybe it's with sharing your faith. That you have somebody that you desperately want to see come to believe in Jesus, and you work yourself up, and you have the speech all prepared, and then you get there. And the opportunity presents itself, and the words are right there on the tip of your tongue, but they just don't seem to come out because you're allowing the doubts to become more compelling than anything else. You know, the answer that Jesus offers isn't to stop having questions. The answer that Jesus offers isn't to just completely get rid of your doubts, because that isn't possible. Faith, you will never be without doubts. I cannot convince you 100% without a doubt that Jesus is God. I can present a lot of evidence. I can present you with a lot of reasons why I believe. But it is the fact that we have a choice that makes it faith. The fact that there is another option is part of what makes it faith. It's not a blind faith that we have, but it is faith. And the answer is not to just get rid of them. The answer is to have greater faith. So Jesus says, you of little faith. If you just had greater faith. But it's important that we see that faith isn't a greater faith in faith. It's not a greater faith that I know without a doubt that I have all the right answers. Henry Nouwen, great theologian and author, had spent some time with a trapeze act, a circus act. And if you would go ahead and put that video up. This is the group that he spent some time with, but as he spent some time with them, he was watching the flying trapeze act. And this is probably one of the most attractive parts of a circus. As we watch these amazing pieces, they fly through the air. And he started to wonder, how is it that they are doing these things? Henry Nouwen said, one day I was sitting with the leader of the troop in his caravan, talking about flying. He said, as a flyer, I must have complete trust in my catcher. The public might think that I am the great star of the trapeze, but the real star is Joe, my catcher. He has to be there for me with split-second precision and grab me out of the air as I come to him in the long jump. How does it work? I asked. The secret, Bradley said, is that the flyer does nothing and the catcher does everything. When I fly to Joe, I have simply to stretch out my arms and hands and wait for him to catch me and pull me safely over the apron behind the catch ball. You do nothing? I said, surprised. Nothing, he repeated. The worst thing the flyer can do is to try to catch the catcher. I am not supposed to catch Joe. It's Joe's task to catch me. If I grab Joe's wrists, I might break them, or he might break mine, and that would be the end of both of us. A flyer must fly and a catcher must catch, and the flyer must trust with outstretched arms that his catcher will be there for him. And I think that this is such a beautiful picture of what faith is. That yes, we have to do something. We have to get out of the boat. We have to move. But our faith isn't in the fact that we can move, that we can spin, that we can do just the right thing. But our faith is in the catcher. And that's what Peter had to learn. As he's sinking, he cries out and he says, Lord, save me. He cries out to the only one who can save him. The only one who is able to catch him and hold on. Your faith, as strong as it may be strong enough to motivate you, but it will never be strong enough to sustain you. I'm reminded of the words of Jesus Christ as he was on the cross. In his most desperate hour, he cries out with a loud voice and he says, Father, into your hands I commit my spirit. Jesus is modeling faith. He moved. He got out of the boat. He's hanging there on the cross just as Peter gets out of the boat and starts walking, but he's dependent upon Father to catch him. Well, let me ask you as we close this morning, what is it that God is calling you to do? To get out of the boat? Is it something in your job? Is there's some area of your life or your faith that God has commanded you to come? Will you get out of the boat? And put your trust not in your ability to know and to have all the right answers, but in His ability to sustain you. If you would like to come, we offer the invitation to you. You can come to the front or the back. We'll welcome you with open arms and help you in whatever way we can. Why don't you come as we stand and sing together?
My hope is built on nothing less than Jesus' blood and righteousness.